Welcome today, everybody. This is an introduction to self-regulation, executive function in practice, and that creating and navigating that challenge. So I'm just going to go through quickly the agenda for today. So first of all, we're going to be looking at self-regulation, executive function. Then we're going to be looking at creating and navigating that challenge and what that looks like. Then we're going to be looking at cognitively challenging physical activity. Then we're going to be going on to adult-led games and play. Then we're going to be looking at the pedagogical continuum and creating and navigating challenge. We're going to be looking at how challenge directly develops executive function. We're going to be looking at adult directed group times and small group work. And then we're going to be looking at your continuous provision and how the environment and adults play a role in this. So first of all, we're going to talk about self-regulation and executive function. So children learn self-regulation through interactions with adults who help them manage stress and model calm, thoughtful responses, which if you came on a previous webinar, this is what we call co-regulation. So what this might look like is a teacher might calmly guide a child through taking deep breaths when frustrated, and they might gradually help them to internalize their own coping strategies. So self-regulation is the ability to manage their emotions and thoughts and actions and to achieve a goal or respond appropriately. And it helps children to stay calm, focused, and manage those thoughtful choices. So previously, in the previous webinar, we looked at Stuart Shankner and his self-regulation model. And what this does, it helps us understand that challenging behavior in young children is often a sign of underlying stress rather than those deliberate misbehavior. And what Shankner said was that this stress can occur across those 5 domains, if you remember. So we looked at the biological, emotional, cognitive, social, and pre-social. And those stresses drain a child's energy, which will make it really harder for them to regulate their thoughts, emotions, and actions. So in settings, adults can support children through co-regulation, guiding them to calm down, focus, and practice that self-control. The key is to focus on managing stress and energy rather than just controlling their behavior, and to recognize that self-regulation is a skill that will develop gradually with that consistent support. So what you want to think about is that by creating environments that reduce stress and provide opportunities to practice regulation strategies, what we do is we help children to grow and become confident, resilient learners. So what I want you to remember is what we spoke about when we said about asking yourself what factor is causing that behavior within that child, not or the environment, not why the child is misbehaving. And then we previously looked at executive function and how this refers to a set of mental skills that help children manage their thoughts, emotions, and actions to achieve goals. So what these include is that working memory, so that holding that information in hand, that inhibitory control, so resisting those impulses, and that cognitive flexibility, so adapting to those new rules or situations. And in early childhood, strong executive function skills allows children to plan, focus, and follow directions and solve problems and regulate their behaviour, which forms a really good foundation for learning, social interactions, and that lifelong self-regulation. And then what we did was we looked at that pedagogical continuum, how it gradually shifts responsibility from adults to children, providing a scaffolded pathway for developing both self-regulation and executive function. So children first learn strategies by observing and practicing with support. And then what they do is they apply them independently in lots of meaningful contexts. Now, what I want us to do now is I want us to watch this video and just reflect on what I spoke about last session. So Sabine Dobor reminds us that executive function, so that ability to plan, focus, and manage those impulses, isn't fixed. It can be nurtured and strengthened through experiences. So as you think about your own work with young children, what I want you to think about is what are some everyday moments when you see them using these skills, like focusing, waiting, or adapting to change, and how might we as educators strengthen those abilities through the way we structure those play routines? Has anybody got anything they want to offer to that? In my classroom, if I'm talking from me personally, I see executive function skills as action all the time. So often in small but powerful moments. So, for example, when children are waiting for their turn during a game, they're practicing that impulse control. When they plan how to build a tall block tower building and negotiating who does what, they're using planning and that flexible thinking. And when something doesn't quite go their way, so like when a tower falls down, they're learning that emotional regulation and that problem solving. So as practitioners, we can strengthen these skills by designing experiences that invite children to use them. So when you're planning for your continuous provision or your enhancements, have a think about that. How are you planning them to develop that your child's executive function skills? So that can also mean creating routines with really clear expectations, or offering open-ended play where they make decisions and giving them time to try again when something doesn't quite work. So even simple strategies like narrating their thinking, so saying things like, you stopped and thought through before you acted, and really help children become aware of their own executive function in action. So now what we're going to look at is we're going to go on and look at how we can create and navigate this challenge for children. So creating appropriate challenge can help strengthen children's executive function skills in the early years. So activities are more effective when educators gradually adjust the difficulty based on a child's performance. So allowing them to build their own skills at their own pace, and that's really, really important. So group games and collaborative challenge can be especially powerful, but it's important to ensure that the level of challenge is suitable for all the children participating. Effective challenges give children opportunity to experiment with different strategies on their own. So while practitioners provide guidance and support when introducing new tasks or when children encounter difficulties, helping them develop that problem solving, that planning, and those self-regulation skills. So cognitively challenging physical activity, something else which is really, really important. So creating challenge can have an effective impact on a child's executive function skills, and this involves two types of activities. So the first we'll look at is cognitively challenging physical activities, and what these activities can improve is children's executive function outcomes, so such as their working memory, which we've just spoken about, that inhibitory controls, that impulse control, and cognitive flexibility. So this included that complex movement and switching between different tasks. So complex movement activities and switching between tasks are absolutely excellent ways to support executive function skills in the early years. So activities that require children to follow multiple steps, to change directions or alternate between tasks, help develop that working memory, that inhibitory control, and that cognitive flexibility. So by challenging children to plan, adjust, and adopt their actions, what you're doing as practitioners is you're strengthening the mental skills that underpin that problem solving, that self-regulation, and that learning readiness. So if we look at the research behind this, it does not include physical activities such as running or jumping. For example, children must remember those multiple complex movements, pay attention to instructions being given by the adult, and adjust their actions accordingly. So what this will do then is this will help them to develop and to support this. So for example, you might use obstacle courses, you might use games including like balancing and coordination games, throwing and catching, or even target games. What I want us to do now is I want to have a look at this video. Now, what this video we're about to watch does, it emphasizes how movement-based activities in an early childhood setting can help children build those key executive function skills, such as that working memory, that inhibitory control, and that cognitive flexibility. What it does is it encourages practitioners to plan movement challenges where children must switch between actions or rules and adapt to new instructions and maintain focus. And what this does is it supports that self-regulation executive function. What this activity you're about to see is it's designed to combine movement with cognitive challenges. So children practice working memory, inhibitory control, and cognitive flexibility while staying physically active. So let's have a look. So what I'm going to do now is I want you to have a look at these questions on the screen. I will read them to you. So it says, how does the use of whole body in developing gross motor skills support children to develop their working memory and tune into that learning? How does this create a challenge for that learning situation? And how do you plan for gross motor development, which can also support executive function? So list the games and play-based experiences you use within your setting or plan to use to support this learning. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to put you in a breakout room just for 5 minutes. If you want to take a picture of this, so you can talk about it in your breakout room. What I'll do is I'll pop it in the chat as well. Have 5 minutes to discuss it between yourselves, and then we'll come back together and see what you've come up with. First point, so using your whole body in activities like climbing, balancing, jumping, or navigating obstacle courses that engages those multiple senses simultaneously. So what this does, it strengthens those neural connections, and it promotes attention. So when children must remember sequence of movement, so either following those instructions or just interchanging rules, what they're doing is they're exercising that working memory. So that physical engagement also helps children tune into learning by increasing that alertness, that focus, and that readiness to participate in those cognitive tasks. And then if we look at the second point, so any movement-based challenges naturally engage children because they're active and playful. So by introducing rules, sequences, or variations in movements, what practitioners are doing is they're creating tasks that are complex enough to require thinking and problem solving, but they're also achievable. And that's what you need to keep in mind, that it's always achievable for children. And what this does is it then motivates children and keeps them engaged. So the combination of physical exertion, social interaction, and goal-directed activity makes learning both fun and also cognitively stimulating. And planning for this should combine physical challenges with those opportunities to discuss those 3 things we talk about in executive function. So that working memory, that inhibitory control, and that cognitive flexibility. So examples of games and play-based experience include, so you might have obstacle courses. So you would include your balancing, crawling, jumping, and hopping. And you might change the sequence of the obstacle course to encourage that planning and memory. You might have those musical movement games, such as freeze dance or red light, green light, which with changing rules. And what this will do is that will strengthen that attention and that impulse control. You might have follow the leader variations, where you create complex movement patterns where children must remember and adapt to new sequences. You might have task switching relays, where children must complete different mini tasks while moving, so hopping, stacking blocks, or carrying objects. And you might have ball or beanbag games, so throwing, catching, and aiming, but you might add rules to this, such as left hand only, or a target sequence. And what this will do is it'll promote that focus, strategy, and that self-control. So these activities integrate gross motor skill development with executive function challenge, so that can make physical play a really, really powerful tool for learning. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at those adult-led games and play. So integrating movement and play, so games such as hide and seek, head, shoulders, knees, and toes, musical chairs, dance freeze, Simon Says. What this does is it promotes self-regulation skills in a really fun and engaging way. So these activities encourage children to move their bodies, breathe deeply, and practice that impulse control. So rhythmic and movement-based group activities can also help develop that motor coordination, that auditory processing, and all those self-regulatory skills. So really good games for that impulse control is, like I've just said, that red light, green light, that Simon Says, or musical statue, or freeze dance. Games are really good to develop a child's working memory are copy my pattern, where an adult builds a block or a bees pattern, and a child might recreate this from memory, and it might increase the length gradually. Or you might play I Went to the Market, which is a good memory chain game. So you add one item at a time, which is great for verbal recall and focus. Or you might do a treasure hunt for the class with clues, so children remember multi-step instructions. So find the red ball and then find which encourages that sequence. And games for that cognitive flexibility, so that flexible thinking. You might have opposites games. So for example, an adult says touch your head and a child touches their toes, so you might switch the rules halfway through. You might have sorting with changing rules, so start sorting shapes by colour, and then you might switch to size or type, which supports adapting to those new expectations you might have. And then you could also do charades or emotion charades, which helps children shift their thinking and interpret your cues. And if you think about it as well, we go on to look at games of planning and organisation. You might have your obstacle course, you might build a structure, and you might use blocks and Lego and loose parts. Then you might set a goal and be like, let's build a bridge for 2 animals. You might do turn taking, board games, and board games are really, really important with this. So you might do for example, Snakes and Ladders is a really, really good one. And what this does, it supports planning and that delayed gratification. And then you might have emotional regulation through play, through puppet problem solving. So an adult might model calm thinking and coping steps, which is great for practicing frustration tolerance. You might have balloon breathing games where you pretend to inflate and deflate like a balloon. And this makes regulation really playful and accessible. And then you might have a feelings matching game where you use cards to mirrors, or you might have little widget or emoji tokens as well. So what we're going to do now is going to look at this pedagogical continuum. We did look at this in the previous webinar and how we can use this in creating and navigating that challenge. So the pedagogical continuum explains how an adult shifts their level of involvement in a child's learning. So from that highly guided to that completely child-led. So when applied to executive function, it supports children to navigate challenge by offering just the right help, while still allowing them to do all the thinking. What it does is it ensures challenge is just beyond the current ability. And so it's not too easy, but it's not overwhelming. It makes sure that it's supported without taking over. So scaffolding it will fade as the competence of the child grows. It's responsive to emotional cues. So frustration becomes learning, not a shutdown. And it's focused on thinking, not performance. So children learn how to plan, adapt, and persist. So in practice, executive function support means you start with more supports at the left-hand side where it's all those adult-led activities, and then you'll gradually reduce that responsibility through your guided play, which is where you do a lot of scaffolding. And at that point as well, you'd keep the challenge for the children within reach with effort. And what you do is as well, you'd stay tuned to their regulation and confidence. So what I want you to do now is I want us to have a look at this video and see how this relates to the pedagogical continuum.
Imogen, she's stuck in the mud. However, we're going to get through it. She's not stuck. The floor is lava. How do we play that game? You have to be careful. What are we being careful of? Have you watched it? Step on the crates. Why do we step on the crates? Because the floor is lava. What will the lava do to us if we stand in it? Oh no, will we? Will it burn our toes? What about Mrs. Rafter? What will I do? Can I come on here with you? Am I safe now? Whoa, it's a bit wobbly. It's a bit wobbly. Do you know what I think I might do? I think I might put some lava boots on. Yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to put my lava boots on. That's it. I'm safe now. You didn't put your boots on. Did you? I didn't see you do it. Are you allowed to put your feet on the floor on this bit? What do you need? You need this? That's it. Why do we need the wood? It's very long. Okay. Do you want to go and get the wood and show me what you want to do with it? Should I help? What am I going to do with it now? Do you think it's long enough to reach all the way across? Is it long enough? Have you? Is it long enough to reach those next crates, Felix? Is it? Should we try it? Oh, what do you think? Do we need the crate? Oh, Darcy knows what to do. There we go. Darcy, wait a minute, Felix. She's not ready. Darcy has gotten the crate and she's lifted that up both together. Are you balancing? Put your arms out, that'll help you balance. What are you going to do now, Felix? We've run out of track. We need someone. Tommy, can you come and help me? Do you want to go and find the other crates? Because we've run out of track. Where are you going to put it? Next to that one. Do you not need to put your arms out? I can. Where do you need it to be? Just here. Okay. Can I move this one as well? Do you think we could use the cones for anything? No? Maybe. I know. What do you know? Tommy spotted something. What do you think Tommy's doing with the tyre? You don't want to do this bit. You feel a little bit nervous? Would you like some help? I'll come back and help you when it's time to go. Go. Oh, Wibble. Did you notice that then? That was quite tricky, wasn't it? Because this crate is so high and that's very low. It was a little bit tricky. Do you think you can manage it? Do you need some help? That's it. You could step on the cone. Can you manage? Oh, well done. Darcy, you are such a kind friend. I love the way that you've helped Imogen there. She was stuck and she needed your help. There we go. Down we go. That's very low, isn't it, from being very high? It's quite tricky. You might need both hands for that one. There we go. Imogen.
So what I want us to do is I want us to think about how the practitioners movement along that pedagogical continuum, and I want us to reflect on these questions. So, which executive function skills were most visible? Could anybody see any that they thought were most visible there? So when I was watching it, the adult was introducing the challenge, so what they were doing is she was setting up the environment and initial safety expectations. So what she does is she was naming the purpose of the activity, she was navigating the obstacle course, and what she was doing is she was making key decisions at the start. So she was establishing that shared understanding and that safe entry into the challenge. What she did as well is if we looked at the middle of that pedagogical continuum with the guided play, what she was doing is she was supporting children to think before they were acting. So she was modeling and demonstrating possible strategies without giving solutions. So she was breaking challenges into those small manageable steps where they were needed. So she was slowing children down. She was offering those prompts. She was telling them, like, what could you try next? She was staying nearby at all times for that regulation and that confidence. And what this was doing, it was building competence without removing that ownership. It was also co-constructed, so she was sharing those problems as well, so they were problem solving together. So what we saw was the children were beginning to suggest ideas how to arrange or navigate the equipment. And what she did was she listened and she repeated back to the children, and she helped the group to decide what to do. So she was offering multiple solutions, and it wasn't just the adults, it was the children as well. And then there was child initiated as well, but she offered that really, really sensitive support. So what she did was she stepped back and she was observing rather than directing. So she intervened at times only for safety or that emotional support. So it's what you need to remember in these situations is those light touch prompts, so that descriptive feedback rather than correcting. So obviously give children that wait time before stepping in. And what this does, it promotes self-regulation, that persistence and that ownership. And then if we think about the other end of the continuum, where it's that child-led, that independent exploration, the children repeat the course by choice, they adapt the challenge themselves. So with the adult present is minimal and observational. So what they were doing is she was then able to consolidate that learning through practice and mastery. So what this video shows is that movement along the continuum is not a fixed position. What she was doing is she was adjusting her role based on the child's confidence, the safety, the frustration levels, and their emerging ideas. So the ultimate goal really is to gradually release that adult introduction to the guides, the co-thinking, to then where you step back and you take the children's lead on it. Let me just go through this. Here we go. Right, so how does challenge directly develop executive function? So there was a lady called, who still is, Adele Diamond, and what she is, she's a developmental cognitive neuroscientist at the University of British Columbia, and she's considered to be one of the pioneers who helped to define and clarify what executive functions are, especially their development in infancy and early childhood. So what she does is she links challenge directly to the development of executive function, because executive functions are activated and strengthened when children face tasks that require planning, self-regulation, and flexible thinking. So here's a breakdown of what she thinks. So when you're thinking about it within your setting, you need to think about how challenge requires those core executive functions. And what Diamond emphasized was that executive function is most engaged when a task is not automatic, meaning that children have to inhibit impulses, so resist doing the first thing that comes to mind. So they need to hold that information in their working memory. They need to remember their goals, the steps, or the rules while acting. They need to think flexibly. They need to switch strategies or adapt when the first approach doesn't work. So an example of this is a child building a bridge with blocks. They might encounter that instability. They must stop. So there's that inhibition. They must remember previous structures that have worked, which is that working memory. And they must try a new arrangement, which is that cognitive flexibility. And what Diamond did was she showed that these executive functions are exercised when children face manageable challenges, especially ones that are slightly beyond their current ability. So I call it a just right challenge. So the challenge must be developmentally appropriate. So tasks that are too easy do not engage executive function at all. And tasks that are too hard can cause that frustration and overwhelm those executive function capacities. So what she did was she emphasized the importance of the zone of proximal development, which is obviously Vygotsky. So that challenge that could stretch the child without causing that failure. And the implications of this is the challenge is not just about difficulty, it's about creating those conditions where executive function is needed and practiced. And then you need to think of the role of the adult in linking that challenge to executive function. So she stressed that executive function develops best in supportive, responsive environments, meaning adults. So scaffolded tasks so that children can attempt challenges successfully. So you might want to provide prompts, you might want to provide reminders or strategies without taking over. So what you want to do is you want to encourage children to reflect. So by asking them questions such as, what could you try next? Or what do you think didn't work? And this turns challenge into a learning experience that strengthens that executive function rather than a task that only tests their current skills. And then what you want is that challenge through that play and that problem solving. So her research highlights that play, games, and open-ended problem solving are ideal ways to introduce challenges because they require planning and that goal-directed behavior. So what you want to do is you want to involve trial and error, which exercises flexibility and persistence. So you want to encourage children to regulate emotions when things go wrong. So for example, pretend play when a child organizes a restaurant requires planning menus, taking orders, sharing roles, adapting to changes, all of which engage that executive function. So in summary, what you need to remember is challenge is the activation of executive function, and the inhibition, that working memory, and that cognitive flexibility are all skills that are needed to navigate those challenges. So just right challenges, so slightly above current ability, maximize that executive function development. And if you look at the adult support, that's scaffolding, questioning, and reflection turn challenge into executive function building experiences, and play and problem solving. So that provide natural engaging context for that executive function growth. Now, what we're going to do now is we're going to look at creating those developmentally appropriate challenges for children to develop and practice their skills in different contexts. So we'll be looking at that adult directed small group times, that during your continuous provision with regards to the learning environment, and the continuous provision with regards to the adult role. So during that adult directed group times and that small group work, so what you need to think of here is the vehicle for learning. So is that playing those games and that open-ended problem solving. So in the early years, learning happens best when it's active and engaging, which as practitioners, we're all aware of. So vehicles like playing games and open-ended problem solving are all particularly powerful because they encourage curiosity and that experimentation. Children explore when we're asking them what happens if, so that happens. And if we ask questions like that, it's giving them this without that fear of failure. What we want to do is we want to promote social and cognitive skills through that collaborative play, games that develop turn-taking, communication, and that reasoning. We want to enable that self-directed learning through those open-ended tasks, which allow children to follow their interests. We want to make choices and solve problems at their own pace. So what your role in that is adults can scaffold these experiences, guiding children to notice those patterns, to reflect on their choices, or obviously you can try and give them alternative strategies. What then you want to think about as well is then planning those challenges and opportunities for that discovery. So challenges in early years is about stretching thinking just beyond a child's current capabilities. But what you need to remember is you don't want to push them into frustration. And what you can do as an adult is plan this by observing a child's current skills and interests, and really getting to know your child, which I think is something in early years we're really, really good at doing. You can offer provocation, so that's like your enhancements. You can plan for your materials that you're going to use, so your continuous provision, or your scenarios that invite that experimentation. You can ask those open-ended questions like, I wonder what would happen if, or you can allow time for persistence, reflection, and that problem solving. And what this approach promotes is that perseverance and resilience, which is essential aspects for executive function. And children, what they'll then learn is to internalize, is to be able to plan, inhibit impulse reactions, and regulate their emotions when faced with difficulties. And what you want is those low threshold, high ceiling tasks. So these are tasks that are accessible for all children, regardless of skill level. So for example, building with blocks, exploring water play, or simple sorting games. High ceiling tasks can be extended or deepened for more advanced learners. So for example, creating complex structures, experimenting with floating versus sinking, or introducing some more variables. And the benefit of this for executive function is that children can self-differentiate, so they can make their own decisions and extend their learning independently or with your guidance. And then you want to include children in that challenge setting within your setting as well. So children are more motivated and engaged when they contribute to their own learning goals. And this can be done by asking children to predict outcomes or suggest next steps in their activities. So by co-creating success criteria for games or projects, or offer choices about materials, rules, or approaches. So in adult-led earlier settings, what you can do is you can scaffold decision-making, you can model those problem-solving strategies for gradually releasing that responsibility. You could encourage children to reflect on what strategies worked, and what this does is then that promotes that metacognition. So for example, in a building challenge, instead of saying build a tower, an adult might ask, what kind of tower could stand the tallest? What blocks will you use first? What could you change if the tower falls down? Here, what children are doing is they're setting their own mini challenges within the framework provided. So they're supporting planning from that working memory and flexible thinking. And what these are, again, is their key components for our executive function. Now we have a look at continuous provision in the environment as well. So continuous provision refers to the carefully planned environment and resources that are always available for children to explore independently. It allows children to revisit, practice, and extend those skills over time. And it's a powerful way to support them in creating a navigating challenge while building those executive function and self-regulation skills. So what I would always do is I'd firstly provide them with those open-ended resources. So offer materials that can be used used in multiple ways. So your blocks, your loose parts, your natural objects, fabrics, climbing equipment. And what these do, they encourage that problem solving, creativity, and planning as children explore different ways to use them. So for example, a child might first build a tower and then later try to make a bridge. So they might increase that complexity on their own. Vary that level of challenge. So include resources and spaces that cater to different abilities, so all children can find a just right challenge. So for example, offer climbing structures or obstacle courses of different heights and complexity. So what you do is you gradually increase difficulty as confidence and competence grows. You might encourage peer collaboration, so design spaces and tasks that promote teamwork, negotiation, and shared problem solving. So you might have large scale construction or group movement games, which encourage that communication and that social regulation. And then again, you might want to rotate and refresh challenges. So I do this every term. So what I find this does then, it keeps that interest high and that executive function stimulated by subtly changing materials or introducing new rules or goals. So you might add number cards for throwing game or new textures to a sensory path. So what you're doing is you're constantly being reactive to the needs of the children. And then if we look at the adult role in this, so as we know, executive function skills include, again, that working memory, that cognitive flexibility, and that impulse control, which underpin that problem solving and that self-regulation and learning. But creating challenge and helping children navigate them requires that deliberate adult support. So first of all, you need to have a look at your availability of adults. Why does this matter? Because executive function develops through those guided experiences. So children need adults who are present, observant, and ready to respond when challenges arise. So for example, a child attempting a tricky construction task knows an adult is nearby to offer those prompts or suggestions, which will allow them then to persist without giving up. You want to think about the responsiveness of the adults and teachable moments. So being responsive means tuning into the child's needs, interests, and signals at the time, and using those moments to all constantly develop their learning. So for example, a child in role play might struggle with sharing resources, and a responsive adult might step in with questions. How can we take turns so everyone can play? So what they'll be doing then is they're guiding that planning and that impulse control, those inhibition skills. And then you want to think about those quality interactions. So here we're talking about Shrek. So that share, remember, engage, and challenge. So that share where the adults model that thinking aloud and problem solve. That remember, where adults prompt children to recall previous experiences. That engage, where we're opening those open-ended questions to obviously spark that curiosity. And that challenge, where we're introducing that slightly harder task to stretch those skills. And what this does is supports that metacognition, that working memory, and that self-regulation, which will allow a child to reflect, plan, and adjust strategies with that adult support. And then you want to think about that effective scaffolding. And here I'm thinking about the stairs approach. So that support, thinking, adjust, invite, and reflect. So scaffolding adjusts the difficulty of tasks based on where the child currently is. And then you gradually release the responsibility as the competence grows. So if you think about it as building a bridge with blocks, an adult models stabilizing techniques, and then a child might try this independently. And then the adult might ask the child what could make it stronger to encourage that problem solving. So approaches to risky play and risk taking is physically or cognitively challenging play where children test limits safely. So this might be climbing, balancing, or experimenting with water or tools. So what this does is it encourages that decision making, that risk assessment, and that self-regulation. So what it does, it teaches the children to plan, evaluate outcomes, and manage their emotions when facing uncertainty. So what I'm just going to do now is quickly reflect on today's session. So creating and navigating challenge is important for self-regulation and executive function, because what you need to remember is challenge activates growth of executive function. So when a task is just hard enough, the brain has to use that planning, working memory, cognitive flexibility, and that inhibitory control. And what this does is it strengthens those systems the same way muscles grow under tension. It teaches the brain how to manage emotions and impulses. So facing challenge requires that tolerating frustration, that delayed gratification, and calming the nervous system. And the repeated practice of this will build emotional resilience instead of avoidance. And challenge builds internal motivation and confidence. So successfully working through difficulty increases that self-efficiency, so I can handle hard things. And it reduces that fear of failure, which is what we really, really want to teach our children. We also want to show them that, you know, it encourages that persistence, and avoiding challenge leads to dependence on external regulation instead. And what it does, it supports that long-term independence. So children and adults who practice managing challenge become better at organising themselves without prompts, staying focused without pressure, and recovering from that setback. So in short, self-regulation and executive function don't develop by avoiding difficulty. They grow through that manageable challenge that teaches the brain how to think, adapt, and to stay in control. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you've taken something away from this. If you could just scan this QR code when you get time and give us some feedback, that would be great. If you want to do it now, that'd be good. I'll give you a few minutes to do it. That'd be great. Thank you. Now, while you're doing that, I'll go through some more dates for your diary. So on the 14th of January, we're going to be looking at the next self-regulation and executive functioning practice, and we'll be looking at monitoring and that self-awareness. And then coming up from the hub as well, you can have bespoke advisory sessions, so you can book in to speak to a member of the hub on anything you feel like you need support in within your setting. We've also got room leader networks, babies networks for 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds. We also have half-termly earlier SEND networks, which are also face-to-face and online. And then we have also got local area conferences coming up. So keep your eyes peeled. They'll be on our website and our Facebook pages and social media for you to have a look at. And from all of us at the Hub, I'd say thank you so much for joining us today, and we will see you next time. Thank you ever so much, everybody.